And here I am with Pumpkin Spice Chapter 2. Okay, here we go. Many days had passed since Henrietta had met the apathetic ghost who haunted her property. Agnes disappeared in a puff of smoke after admitting she was murdered. Henrietta had begun to think that she had hallucinated the entire meeting until she saw Agnes floating casually over the field, never straying too far from where she had first appeared and going absolutely nowhere near the barn. After a while, Henrietta had found Agnes's presence oddly calming. She saw Agnes often comfort the hens after a predator had come too close to their enclosure, and she spoke to the plants as if they could hear her. She was a sweet and gentle soul who was taken from this earth far too quickly. There was no doubt in Henrietta's mind that Agnes did not deserve to die. That it must have been by someone so unbelievably dastardly and sadistic. Unfortunately, Henrietta was right. Agnes Elizabeth Smith was 18 when she was brutally raped and murdered. When she was alive, she lived and worked on her father's farm, and as the eldest, she would help her mother with her work when she was busy looking after her troublesome younger siblings. So in her mother's place, Agnes would make trips to the local market and pick up the supplies they needed. As Agnes grew, she noticed how many of the lads stared at her. She had been blessed with her mother's petite figure and her father's blonde hair. She was admittedly quite the beauty, though none of the boys could woo her, as she was not interested in any of them, and she soon developed a reputation for turning men down. Her father had received many luxurious offers for Agnes's hand in marriage, but being a daddy's girl came in handy, and like his daughter, he turned every one of them away. After some time, Agnes began noticing some of the men from the market would follow her on a walk home, and every time Agnes sped up, they sped up. Sometimes she was lucky enough to reach her house in time, and her father would chase them away. Sometimes she was not so lucky, and hands would grab at something that most certainly did not belong to them. And sometimes she was shoved up against a wall with a gin-soaked tongue shoved down her throat before being rescued by her father. Her beauty was the talk of the town, and bedding her was on the mind of every man in that town. One day, a group of very persistent men who had asked to marry her on several occasions shadowed her. They pursued her all through the market and on her walk back. When she got to the gates of the farm, she thought she was safe, but one of the men grabbed her from behind, covered her mouth to keep her from screaming, and dragged her to the barn. Her father, her protector, was not home. He was in the next town over selling their livestock. She was alone, but she fought. She fought them with all the strength she could muster, but it was not enough. The man pursued her, ravished her, bashed her skull in with a piece of farming equipment, then quickly buried her in the empty field. Her parents deduced what had happened to their missing daughter from the bloodstains in the barn. Her parents sold the farm and moved as far away as they could, because no matter how hard her mother tried, she could not completely scrub the stain from the floor. Henrietta also tried to clean the peculiar stain she found, but gave up when she realized it was futile. Agnes put off telling Henrietta the story of how she died as long as possible, but she inevitably caved. Agnes did not want to see the look of pity that would be engraved in Henrietta's eyes every time she looked at her. When she told Henrietta, she was quiet and still, as if it took a moment to process it all. Henrietta was eventually brazen enough to ask her the questions she had. Why did you not want to marry any of them? Were you waiting for your one true love? Agnes sighed. She adored hearing the stories of true love when she was younger. It was a dream of hers to fall in love and live happily ever after. But she did neither of those things, and over time she no longer believed in love's power, because love was not the answer to everything. It was not a magic cure-all, and it was not strong enough to overpower anything. Agnes fell out of love with love. Love does not exist, was Agnes's reply to Henrietta's questions. So why did you say no? Because I do not like boys, said Agnes. Even dead, she had fear whether to say the next thing that she never dared to say out loud before. But she looked deep into Henrietta's eyes, and her fears crumbled. I like girls, she said, with a heart full of courage. That is the end of chapter 2.